Hey everybody, hi, it's Annette DeSico, Director of Learning and Development, bringing to you a video. This video is about how to do a virtual showing, a virtual buyer tour without actually physically showing a home, which I know many of us are not doing. We're working from home, and our buyers and sellers may not be interested either in a physical showing. So this is a way for you to do a virtual tour, and not just to do a virtual tour, buyer tour, but to actually have a face-to-face consultation today from your own home with your buyer. There are 3 ways to do that, and this is even before we get into present. The first way is what we're doing right now. We're having a Zoom meeting. This is a recording, but had it been live, we would be having a live consultation or meeting. So what you can do is you can get a free Zoom account. It's really very easy. I got over that learning curve very quickly, as did your manager and many people today. Zoom stock has gone up. So you might want to try it. And then you would invite your buyer to the meeting. They would accept, they would click. It might ask them to download Zoom, 1, 2, 3, you're face-to-face. And then you would share your screen. You would, as I'm going to do in a moment, you would be sharing Moxi Present and the buyer tour. If you're not interested or not inclined to get that free Zoom account, well, another way simply is for you to make an appointment, a phone appointment with your buyer and say, we're going to jump on the phone at noon. I'd like to show you this buyer tour. Had we been able to get out on the road on Saturday, we would have seen these homes. So let's talk at noon. And then you would email them the buyer tour, and you would open it up on your screen. They would open it up on their screen, and you'd have basically a phone conversation or consultation. There is actually a third way if you're into FaceTime. I was on Moxi Engage recently. I looked at the buyer contact, and I noticed that there was a little button that said, do you want to FaceTime with them? So that would be your third way. So let me share the screen. Let's jump into present, and let me show you how to do a buyer tour. Okay, share my screen, and I'm going to choose our home screen. So we're on Hub. Make sure you all are aware of the URL that's right up here, hub.bhhsnj.com, and you can find that easily. Okay, so we're going to now choose present. That's where all our presentations are, and certainly that is where the buyer tour is. Okay, so from present, and I'm just going to minimize my face a little bit, we're going to create new. Now, of this new presentation slide, you can see there is a buyer presentation type. But we're going to pay attention to the buyer tour and also the non-listing. The non-listing is where you would find presentations that did not have a CMA. And that's where we actually have a buyer packet. But we don't need to go there right now. I just want you to know that that's where that exists if you just want a buyer packet without doing a buyer tour. But I'm going to show you how to do a buyer tour and actually bring in the buyer packet. So we're going to hit continue, and we're going to choose the first one, which is the default buyer tour. It has 9 pages in it, and those are simply property pages. So we will continue, and I will name it virtual buyer tour. And obviously you would be naming it the name of the client. I will hit create. And as you know, it takes a couple of seconds to download. And as soon as we see that circle, it will appear. Okay, it's letting us know on top, we want to look at the 4 selections you have. You have options, you have search for your property, you have listings. When you actually choose them, you'll see a number there. And then these are the 9 pages I mentioned are already a part of it, but we're going to see how we can bring in additional pages, which to me, what would be important would be a buyer packet. And I'll spend a moment when we get to that area. So let's going to stay in options. And as you see, how I named it is right here. But of course, you would say Mr. Buyer and their name. But are you aware of the resource INRIX Drive Time? Now, this is an optional resource, but what INRIX Drive Time is if your buyer will be commuting from their place of work to the property that they want to buy. This is very good for reload clients, but it's really good for any client who is buying outside of their normal area, buying in a new area, and they are commuters. If they are not commuters, you wouldn't use this. But let's say that they're going to be working, or they are working, and I'm going to choose where I work at 220 Davidson Avenue. So you would certainly ask them if they could share this with you. The location is now set. Again, that's their place of employment where they're commuting from. It's set. We're going to click set. And now an INRIX Drive Time graph will appear on every one of the properties that we select for the buyer tour. Okay, isn't that cool? All right, we're now going to go to continue. And this is where we are in a search area. Now, I would advise you to have already gone into the MLS and selected your properties, and it would be very simple then for you to put in MLS numbers here. I did not do that, so I'm going to click location because, again, this is just a training video, but had I had an actual buyer, I certainly would have spent time in the MLS deciding or maybe communicating with them based on their preferences, which properties, which MLS numbers I would select. So I'm going to put in a zip code, 07052, where I live. And I'm very simply going to put a narrow price parameter, again, for the purpose of this. That's not what I wanted. Let's go back. And I will pull up, let's say, 350,000 to, I'm going to pull up some townhouses to 450. And what I'm going to do is choose a filter because, again, because we're in a training exercise, I want to make this selection process simple. I'm going to choose townhouse. I'm going to deselect single family, click apply. And now I have 12 properties. Well, I'm going to choose 3, again, for the purpose of this exercise, and I'm going to choose 3 that are in different complexes so we could take a look at the map and decide on what order we would want the properties if we were doing a true tour. So I'll choose Sullivan. I know Clarkin is in a different complex, and I know Bongart is also in a 3rd complex. So I will select just those 3 and click lower right-hand corner of the screen, continue. Now you'll see we're in tour order. Let's take a look at that map, and we see that it's not exactly conducive right now to an actual showing, an actual driving the route. For example, maybe you know that they're meeting you there, and maybe you know that they're coming from, let's say, right here on the map, Pleasant Valley Way. Well, actually, if they're coming from Pleasant Valley Way, that kind of is an okay order, but maybe they were coming from, let's say, down here, Eagle Rock Avenue. We would want to move these properties a little bit. So how would we do that? We would come back up here to change order. And as you see, we could simply select and move them around. And then if we look back on our map, it makes a little more sense if they're coming from an area down here. Okay, so we do have to save that order. I'll click Save Order. All right, we have our order. Now, what else should we look at? Well, there's a couple of things. The buyer will be able to click right through to listing detail. So you might want to take a little look right now. What is this listing detail? Is there a video? Are there still photos? what are the remarks and do I like them, or would custom remarks be a little bit better for a consultation with a buyer? So you could take a look at that. And you could see that the remarks are typical. It's basically promotion for the property, but that's not what we're looking to do. We're not looking to promote it as a listing agent is. We're looking to help the buyer see the property through buyer's eyes. So I'm going to go back to that in a second because we might want to customize those remarks. But let's take a look here. And again, you can look at every photo. The buyer will. The buyer has a pretty good description also on the right of amenities. But remember, we had selected INRIC's drive time from the very beginning when we started this. If we click on it, make sure the buyer is aware if you're on the phone with them to click INRIC's drive time. And we can take a look at right here, the commuting time. If we look down at 5 a.m., it takes about 40 minutes to and from, or from home to work, from West Orange to 220 Davidson Avenue in Somerset. But then if we go over to 8 a.m., we see it jumps to 55 minutes. And then at 5 p.m., it's even closer to 60. So this is really a very helpful segment of a buyer tour. Well, let's go back now, because what I wanted to do was show you, let's X out of here, that you can change the remarks. Right under listing detail on the left, we have edit remarks. Some of this may be very helpful for the buyer, but again, maybe you just had a conversation with the buyer and you want to let the buyer know that this is a complex on your hot list because the jitney to New York stops at the gatehouse. And this would simply be good if this were an email, which it will end up being anyway, and they have it for future reference. So we'll save it. And then again, you can see whether or not you do or don't want to edit remarks. So we've looked at the properties, we've selected them, we've changed the order of the tour, we've edited remarks, and now we're ready to move on. And I'm going to click continue. Okay, now where we are at now is the actual presentation pages. So if you remember, I said there were 9, if we see them right here, and you could take a look at these 9 and you could decide, do you like them? Are they good? Do they work for you? When you get down to things like listing averages, you might decide, well, I'm not doing a CMA. That might not be that important to me. Price and days on market, you see that varies. That might be helpful if you're deciding on a negotiation strategy. Price and size, not sure if I would like this because not all of our listings have square footage in most of our MLSs. I would stay away from adding that unless you're pretty sure of it. Maybe new construction, that might be pretty ideal for square footage. But you might decide, well, you know, I don't think I want this. And you see the little pencil is your edit button, and you could decide to edit that. Or more specifically, we want to delete that. Okay, we just removed it. Oh, by the way, this is a good point. Your profile is part of Moxi, so you will want to make sure that you had already updated your profile, which is part of your website, and because that's certainly going to the buyer, and that's very important. So you do have your pages now, and now we can see we have 8 because I showed you how you can delete one. But remember I mentioned the buyer packet. I know a lot of you drop off and hand deliver or bring to an open house a buyer packet. A buyer packet is very important because this is when a buyer really knows that you can be their trusted advisor. And a buyer packet is not so much information that a buyer could find out on their own and Google. Sure, they'll be Googling maybe schools, maybe towns, communities. You can add that information, of course, but the real purpose of a buyer packet is to educate, is to teach a buyer something they do not know, they cannot find out or learn by themselves, or they don't know that they don't know it, if you know what I mean. So let's take a look at how our buyer packet would really educate them. So what you can do is you can click Add Page. It will ask you from where. We're not going to get into create new on this particular training segment, but for those of you who are interested, you definitely can create your own pages. But we're going to add from library. And we want to go down to brokerage pages. That's your last selection. There are 84. Don't get nervous. You don't have to choose among 84 pages. But if we look down, we can see the home buyer packet is right here, and it's 14 pages, and it says for a buyer consultation. So let's click on that. And again, you have a choice. You can use all of them or some of them. And if you look, you can add right here. And on the far right, I believe you can, well, that's just printing, so we don't need that. But you can add them, and then they'll move right over to the left. So what you might want to look at is what are these pages, and do I want them? I'm going to quickly show you an example. The first one is from BHHS, and it's a home finding services commitment. It's a very nice page, and you might want to review all of these, of course, beforehand, because you might be consulting on them. But this would be a nice first page. The second page is also from BHHS, from the Resource Center, and it's a worksheet because some of your buyers might want to print this ahead of time so they could take some notes. The third page is on agency relationships. It's a nicer format than a CIS, and it's especially good for people who are out of state. Then what do we have? We have very important page, New Jersey's 3-day attorney review. This is something that really shows how you're a trusted advisor, and you could walk them through this process before they get to that process, right? We don't want to tell someone about attorney review when they're in it. And there's something here about backup offers in the state of New Jersey as well. So I find that to be a very helpful page. We have multiple offer guidelines. Okay, what else do we have? We have something on home inspections, the difference between the cosmetic and the structural defect. Okay, let's go down this list. Something very important, especially for today, when values change. This is a walkthrough sheet for the appraiser. You're giving the appraiser comps, but what you can give the appraiser is something that they really don't know. And those are the finer details of the property and the location, especially the micro location. I mentioned jitney before. A jitney to the train will really let an appraiser know that it might be a higher priced neighborhood. So I suggest you let the buyer know that you can help overcome that if that is a potential objection down the road. One-stop shopping benefit is from NAR. Yes, they really do like all the services of mortgage and title and home warranty all under one roof, again, according to NAR. There are 3 pages. I won't go through all 3, but there are 4 very good pages from Prosperity Home Mortgage. There's a page on the basics. There's a page on the roadmap of the mortgage process. There's a document checklist, and then there is rent versus own for buyers who are still a little bit on the fence. And then there are 2 pages from associated title. So as you could see, this is a true buyer packet that is educating the buyer. So if I wanted to add them, and I'm not going to add them all because for the purpose of time, we'll add 2. I just added them, and we're going to go back. Well, we see right on top, we had 8 pages. Now we have 10 pages. And if you click pages, you can see here they are with the addition of which pages did we add here? We added the home finding commitment towards the end, and we added the home finding worksheet. Well, maybe you think that they should be at the top of the list. You can just drag them right up there. There you go. You might want to put your profile on top. So you can move these, and now we're finished with our presentation. You can view it. I find that it's very important to view before you send, so you really know what it is you're sending. But again, in this case, if we're in a Zoom meeting, we're not sending it yet, we're presenting it. But here you have it. Your whole presentation as they will see it, and that's why that's an important part. You want to know what it is they'll be seeing. Okay, let's get out of that. We already looked at it. This is where you could send it, and you will be sending it even if you are in a Zoom meeting with them. You certainly want them to have it. So you would just fill out who is getting it. I'm going to put my own name. Since I'm in Engage, it's going to come right up. And I'll put down that it is the buyer tour we spoke of. I'll give them a hello, and I'll give them a short message. Let's just say see attached for the purpose of time, but you can write a very nice message, and I'll show you how that will appear. It will copy you if you wanted to, and I'm going to click send. Okay, let's quickly get into my email and see what that looks like. Presentation, and this is the presentation that they'll be getting in their email. So again, if you're phoning it into them, they would look at it, you'd be on the phone. But I think, as you could see here, the most important thing we've shared today is how to do the buyer packet, how to do the buyer tour, how to bring the buyer packet in, how to have a face-to-face consultation, preferably with Zoom, if not on the phone, and if you're really brave, on FaceTime. All right, so next time we'll be doing something in Present on the listing consultation, so look for that video. Thank you all.